So we are here on AOC, and we are going to talk about climate change. With me here is Sylvester, co-founder at AOC, and somebody who speaks Chinese fluently. And also with me here is Mr. Raymond Atanga. So would like to let Sylvester talk more about himself, and then we'll introduce our guest for today, Mr. Raymond Atanga, who is an expert and that we are going to talk about, who is going to give us most of the insights today about the climate change and China's role and Africans' side of it. So, without much ado, I would like to let Sylvester in. So, Sylvester, you're welcome, and let's hear from you.
Right. Clifford, yes. Clifford, thank you so much. And good to meet Mr. Tinga here. And good to be part of this conversation today. I think it's a very important conversation that we are going to have, and it's very timely. Yeah, so my name is Sylvester Demuyako, that's the surname. And I've been engaged in the Africa-China space for the past 10 years, ever since I started learning the Chinese language. Had my undergrad degree in the University of Ghana, political science and Chinese, and moved on to do my master's in international relations from China's Foreign Affairs University. And currently, I'm engaged in Africa-China business consultancy, and a couple of initiatives, including the Africans on China initiative that seeks to amplify the African voice on China's presence on the continent, as well as connect Africans to opportunities that are available in the Africa-China space. So basically, that is it about me. I'm passionate about Africa. I'm a Pan-Africanist, passionate about Africa's options for development, and yeah, I am open to partnerships and conversations that help us advance this particular course. So I'm excited to be part of this conversation that we are all going to have here. And I'm sure that many people will learn a thing or two from it. And by so doing, we are shaping the conversation around climate change, around Africa, China, around Africa's growth and development. So once again, good to be here. Thank you.
Clifford, you may have to unmute. I can see your
Sorry, I
mic.
forgot that I muted myself. All right, so that was great from Sylvester. So just a little, a brief about Mr. Raymond Atanga. Raymond Atanga is a development planner and an academic. He's a consultant too and a lecturer at the university for the CK Tedam University of Technology and Applied Sciences in Navrungo, formerly Navrungo campus of the UDS, that's University for Development Studies. But it's now
Mhm.
autonomous, so it's a fully fledged university on its own. Where Mr. Raymond is a lecturer at the Environmental Science Department. So he's in that area, and he's teaching and research interests are in the areas of environmental planning, climate change, social policy, and sustainable development. And he holds certificates in higher institutions from teaching in higher institutions from the Technical University of Dortmund and ICRA. That's ICRA Wageningen. Let me skip that name. Let me skip the other name.
Wageningen.
Okay. And he
Wageningen.
also, okay, one again. He also holds a bachelor's degree from UDS Tamale and a master's degree from Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. He's he has benefited from preparatory PhD training programs in Technical University of Dortmund and currently a PhD candidate at the School of Government, University of International Business and Economics in Beijing, China. So as we speak, Ramon is currently in China, and his time is
Okay.
very late from us now. We're in Ghana, and it's about 10 a.m., and he is almost around 6 something going. So that's it. Raymond has done some interesting publications recently, and I would like to share. Maybe those of you listening or watching, you could take a detour and go and read those topics and see the very interesting topics. One of them is planned experiments or autonomous adaptation. a question mark. Like, is it a planned experiment? With climate change and all those things, we are going to talk about climate change today. So, is it a planned experiment or an autonomous adaptation? So, an assessment of initiatives of for climate change adaptation at a local level in Ghana, 2023. Cogent social sciences. All right. And then he has another one which he says revisiting sustainable development, sustainability and well-being from the perspective of indigenous people in rural Ghana. Climate change. When we talk about climate change and sustainable development, people in the cities, let's say, they hardly feel it that much, especially in Africa. The rural people are the ones who are really suffering. Those who depend on the cattlers and who to farm and feed, they are the ones who are actually really suffering. And I think this particular topic is something I have not read it yet. I have not read it yet. I told him I'm going to read it. So maybe you can take a read and see what is inside there. And then the final one on this list I have today is what I'm actually very excited about, and it's talking about global south. When we talk about global south, you know what that means. So, sustainable development, conceptual and theoretical insights in the global south 2023 Elga. So, it's on Elga. You can go and check that one out there. So, that's a little bit from Raymond. And as I said, he's somebody who is passionate about climate change, environment, and then the sustainability and social development. So if you are somebody who has also interest in those areas or who don't even have, but once you live in the environment, I think you should check this out and you should follow some of Raymond's work. All right, so thank you, and that's just a brief about Raymond's work. So Raymond, I would like to take your initial comments before we proceed on today's topic, which is about navigating the intersections between climate change, COP28, and then China-African relations. So we're going to talk about climate change, COP28, which just ended a couple of days ago, and then the China-Africa relations. So we would seek to emphasize the complex interplay between the climate change, the recent COP28, and then China's growing influence in Africa. Can they also influence climate change in Africa, or Africans fight towards green climate? Can they influence that? So we're going to check about all those things today. So Raymond, I would like to take your brief comment before we proceed.
Thank you so much. A wonderful introduction about me and Minister. Was it Minister? How
Yes,
do I?
Sylvester. Yeah.
Sylvester, I mean, you should change your normal name.
No, that's my name actually. It's my
Oh,
it's
okay,
my
I didn't
ethnic
know about
my ethnic
that.
tribe name. I prefer to be called that. Yeah, but
Menace,
Sylvester is
okay.
what everybody knows me by. So
All right, all right.
Yeah. And just like Minister, I would like to also be known by my first name, Aitibasa. That's the name my father
All
gave
right.
me, and
yes,
it's my
That's fine.
grandfather's name. So I like it so much.
yes,
It has a
yes.
meaning, a very beautiful meaning that is connected even with the climate change. But that is not the
Okay,
topic now. I'll leave it
okay.
there. Yeah.
All right.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
So yeah, is that all for now, or you want to say something else?
Yeah, I would like to say that I'm really very honored to be part of this. So, climate change is a very topical issue. It is an existential problem. So I think that yeah, doing the whole world a lot of good by you know projecting climate change and trying to increase knowledge about climate change through your medium. And I think that uh, other media houses should also try to emulate your good example, because from my experience, knowledge about climate change is really very low, even though it affects the impacts are there, and it affects everybody. So I really think that you should be applauded for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, all right. So thank you very much.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
the
very
kind
much.
words.
And we really appreciate your time, and we're excited to have you today. We are actually excited to have you today,
Thank you.
and
Yeah.
we are looking forward to having this wonderful discussion. And so, as I said earlier on, this today we are focusing on climate change and the environment. Subsequent ones would be might be different. We are not going to be ending here afterwards. We'll be having further discussions on different topics and about the African China space, business opportunities, and all those things. So okay. All right. Sylvester just left. You join us soon. So we'll be having conversations around those areas. And so today we are talking about climate change and the just a brief about climate change impact on Africa. Why we are so particular about this? Africa is the continent with the least contribution to climate change. When you talk about climate change impact, what the greenhouse gas emissions and all those things, Africa is a continent that has the least influence. It doesn't contribute much. But when it comes to those who suffer more for it, it is Africa that is suffering more. So I contribute less to the destruction, yet I'm the one who is at the receiving end of the destruction. And China is very important here today because when you also look at it, China is the biggest emitter right now. China is the one that emits most after taking over from the US in 2006. China has been the leading emitter of greenhouse gases since then. So we are looking at what is China going to do to mitigate the impact of what its emission is causing, and what is Africa also doing to alleviate the impact of climate change on its citizens. Regardless of the fact that Africa is contributing less, Africa is suffering more. So what is Africa doing? What are Africans doing so that they can be able to save themselves from the impact? And if you look at the figures, if you look at the figures that comes in from climate change emission, uh, Africa barely has over 1.5 billion emission. That's when you are looking at the measurement from environmental experts. Africa barely have 1 billion tons per emission. That's carbon dioxide emission. But when it comes to the impact, you see flood, drought, and recently cyclone Freddy, they impacted Africa so much that so many people are out there without food. Others are also there without place to live as a result of climate change. So that's why we are so particular about it today, and we would want to see how we can go forward as a continent and how our relationship with China can shape that and all those things. So just a background of why we are so particular about climate change today. So thank you. And I go straight to the first part, and we are talking about climate change in Africa. So I would like to take from Raymond Africa's most pressing challenges when it comes to climate change. What is really affecting Africa much, and what are the things that Africa are really suffering with when it comes to climate change? Is it air pollution, flood? How is it affecting Africa? And what areas in Africa does it affect?
Thank you so much. I think that when you talk about climate change, there is one key driver of the climate change phenomena, and that is temperature. Temperature is the main driver of the climate change phenomena. That's what we use to measure, to be able to say that the world's climate have changed over time, starting from using pre-industrial temperature as the basis. At the moment where we are as a world in terms of climate change, 5 years in succession, Every other year, the temperature is always higher than the previous year. This year, 2023, July 6th, recorded the world's highest temperature ever, and that's 17.08 degrees Celsius on the average. Africa is the hottest continent. The world's the world's highest temperature that has ever been recorded is from Africa. Besides, Mali, Mali is the world's hottest country. So the world's hottest country is also in Africa. So Africa is at the focus of climate change, of temperature rise. And what is so disturbing is that projections tell us that this temperature rise will worsen in the future. In the case of Ghana, I want to come home, Ghana. Between 1960 and 2021, the World Bank report tells us that the temperature of Ghana has increased by over 1 degree Celsius. The number of hot days have increased by 13%. And the number of hot nights have also increased by 20%. All these have repercussions on lives, livelihoods, but I won't go there now. I just want to, I want us to understand the magnitude of the climate change situation in Africa. Temperature affects the oceans, temperature affects precipitation, and so many other things. So the other factor apart from temperature itself is precipitation. Science tells us that the evidence so far tells us that precipitation in Africa will be marked by variability, serious variability. That is, there will be changes, unpredictable changes in the normal calendar. That is, you can have intermittent droughts and intermittent rain occurring together. So it makes rainfall very, very unpredictable. One clear example about this is the 2007 flood disaster, where we had a period of drought and the whole year's rainfall came down within a matter of 2 weeks, causing severe flooding. So rainfall variability is one of the factors emanating from climate change that impacts on Africa. Let me run to the third factor, which is coastal erosion. The West African coastline is becoming a very serious problem. In Ghana, every year, coastal erosion consumes 2 to 17 meters of Ghana's coastal line. From 2005 to 2017, a whopping 37% of Ghana's coastal line has been swallowed by the sea.
Can you take those figures again? Like I'm actually I didn't know this was happening, right? So can you just repeat
Yes.
those figures again?
So 2 to 17 meters of Ghana's coastal line is eroded, consumed by the sea every
Two
year.
to 17 meters of our coastal line is being taken by the sea every year.
Every year.
Wow. Wow.
And two because the west part is the eastern part. That is the Ada, the Keta areas. If you get
And
there,
I
coastal
think
erosion is
that's
really,
really happening right now there too. Just recently, the flooding and all those things that happened.
yeah.
And I think just last year the Kita Sea Wall issue came up and all those things. Yeah, I didn't know it was all because of this though. Yeah. All right.
It's really so. We have 37% of the coastal line being consumed. It's gone.
Wow.
So the sea is fighting us, and we're helpless, all because of climate change. The sea is warming, and as it warms, much of the world's water is stored in ice. So they're telling us that the evidence shows that the ice are melting and therefore increasing the volume of the sea. See, what
Wow.
is disturbing is that the science projections tells us that these events are likely to worsen. So we should be prepared for a doomed kind of future. The final one, all this temperature and precipitation, then coastal erosion leads to extreme events, droughts, floods. Flooding has become a regular phenomenon. And in 2022, flooding overtook all other natural disasters combined as uh, 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 the global, killer in terms of impacts. So what this tells us is that we have to take immediate action. Look at the Volta Basin, especially the White Volta Basin. Every year, flooding is occurring and people are dying. Mainly, some of them are school children who probably went to school and is returning, and then the water level has increased, and they must cross, and in the process they lose their lives. Or farmers sometimes who go to farm and they are returning, or farmers who try to rescue their cattle or goats or whatever. So it's really very serious. Droughts are common, they're increasing, and droughts also affect so many other things, including plants, trees. Many trees, tree mortality have increased because of droughts. So these are the ongoing impacts that climate change have on Africa and Ghana.
Wow. Wow. All right.
Really, really
That's really
interesting. Yeah, really interesting revelations here, Clifford. And it's
yeah.
interesting how many people are seeing these things happening, but they don't know why these things are happening. Farmers are having, very regular rainfalls. We are experiencing flooding like never before, and all of that. And people don't know why it is happening. I'm sure others have even attributed it to
The
God,
ghost.
the gods punishing this generation for its sins and all of that. But yeah, Raymond, thanks so much for this revelations and this data, this scientifically proven data that you've given us. I think it's very, very important. It's a subject that many people don't think is relevant, but it is. So maybe just to dig further, what would you say are some of the um, impacts? Some of the how these challenges are impacting different regions and communities within the continent. So for instance, drought, floods, food security, and other things that are affecting parts of the. What would be your assessment of the impacts, the dynamics of the impacts of this climate change situation?
Thank you so much for your question.
Yeah.
I think that climate change impacts are wide. Even culture, climate change is changing the culture. I come from a part of Upper East region that when you greet somebody, good morning, that is Bulika. The response is Lafu Oro and you're cold. I did an intergenerational analysis, and the results show that there is no longer cold. Parents spoke about their, parents and their their grandparents talking about cold, and that usually in those days around November and December, they had to gather stocks and warm themselves, and then they had to. The nature of the buildings were said that the doors were very small and you have a small window because of cold. Now there's no longer cold. One of my respondents told me that maybe we have to change the greeting because there's no longer cold. When you say your good morning, and then you say and you're cold, there's no longer cold. So bulika or kaboy, there's no cold anymore. So climate change is changing even our culture. Now there are certain things in livelihoods in particular. Climate change, particularly in Africa, so many livelihoods are getting lost altogether. Fishing is one, agriculture, farming is at a threat of getting extinct, especially certain indigenous crops. Like I want to give practical examples, particularly from where I come from. There is a crop in Upper East region. I think that's the Upper East, if I'm not wrong, is the only region in the whole world that grows it. It's called Nara, hunger saver. Nara is at the threat of being extinct because of changes in the climate. Now, see, what happens is that the findings show us that um, the season, normal season, especially in northern Ghana, savannah, the Guinea savannah, and the Sudan savannah, the rainfall, the farming season has been reduced drastically. So you need fast growing, drought resistant varieties to be able to, survive. But many of these farmers still rely on the indigenous, varieties because they have no option. Government is not, promoting um, or developing new improved varieties of the local, staples. So it's a very serious thing. Livelihoods, fishing is becoming very unsustainable. Many fishermen have lost their jobs. And as I said, farming is becoming an unprofitable venture. Apart from that, we have the flooding that destroys us. Floods destroy crops, and droughts will come and see. In one of my research findings, a respondent told me that the impacts of climate change, the interplay between droughts and floods, is like a gun and a bomb. That the drought will come, hit us, and then later the bomb will come. That is the flood, and clear all that is left from the drought. And one of them said that the one in charge of, you just talked about how indigenous people would think about this, they would think as the gods. So one of them said the one in charge of the distribution of God and water in God's house is not performing his duties. At the start of the season, he will open the water small, and when they will go out to sow, he will go to sleep. And when they wake him up, he will now just open the water and go to sleep again, and the floods will come and destroy all that is left. So this is how the impacts are. Livelihoods
yeah,
are going. Then we have floods, other extreme events like flooding, and also heat. And also heat. Heat is becoming, a problem for so many people. And heat is linked to so many diseases, cardiovascular diseases, CSM, and so many others. And even normal heat stress can kill you. So the impacts
yeah,
are wide. Water
yeah,
resources are declining,
yeah,
even underground water is declining. So
yeah.
the impact of climate change, I, 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 I can't finish even describing them. They're so wide. And also
Okay.
in recent
Yeah,
times, we've seen climate change induced flooding, destroy critical infrastructure such as roads. We see in this year what happened the Akosombo Dam. They had to spill it
yeah,
because it was, and the consequences that we're facing even right now, still trying to get those who are displaced, to have a decent kind of life.
yeah.
So the impacts are really wide. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And just to add to some of this impact that Mr. Zbiza just mentioned, Clifford. Indeed, the impacts of climate change are wide, and people don't just know it. So economically, so this year I actually happened to consult for a Chinese salt production company in Ghana here around the central region, and they adopt the evaporation method for the salt production. So they depend on the sun, to crystallize, and then they produce and all of that. That is what happens, which means that they depend so much on the weather and the rain patterns for their production. Now this year, the rains started as early as April, all the way till ending of November. It was still raining. What it meant was that they couldn't produce from April up to November, no production. Years ago, they could produce, intermittently within the year, like maybe three consecutive times or two. But this year, they stopped production since April and nothing has happened. The workers who used to work with them and get something small were not working because production wasn't happening. The market women who have salt to sell, salt was in high demand, and so the prices will skyrocket. So these are all adverse effects of climate change that people don't really know. If you trace it, you will know that indeed it's because the rain patterns have changed. That is why these companies are not able to produce per schedule, and that is why the price of salt has increased. So it has a lot of interlinking effects that the normal person might not know, and so that is why these conversations are important, so that people get to know why we are seeing what we are seeing, why we're experiencing what we're experiencing. So I just thought of adding, chipping into it. Yeah, Clifford.
All
Thank
right,
you.
all right. That's a very insightful, and just to look at it, I want to consider Africa as a unit.
Right.
We look at the Horn of Africa, where Ethiopia, Kenya, and all those places are, and they've been experiencing drought for some time, almost 6, 7 years or so. And then last year, flood came in, and then this year, flood came in, and then reports are saying about 2 million people, 2 million children under five risk malnutrition because of the impact of the flood. So the numbers are actually really damning. Like when you look at the numbers, like your heart will like beat. And I focus more on the contribution of Africa to climate change. How much does Africa actually contribute? Factories are not there are no so many factories in Africa. When you look at it, most of the African countries are not that much industrialized, so the emission is very low. Africa also has the largest potential to explore when it comes to green energy, solar, wind, hydro, name it. Africa has all that. But when you look at the contribution that goes towards green energy, the world is preaching green energy, green energy. Africa doesn't have, most of the people in Africa do not have access to light. About 60%, or let's say 640 million people in Africa do not have access to electricity. And if you are taking a population of about 1 billion or approximately 1 billion, 1.2 billion, and you have half of that population not having access to light, and you also see that we have the potential to even have green climate, to have green energy for our people, yet we don't have them. And then when you come to emissions, Africa contributes 1.5 billion, 1.45 billion tons of carbon dioxide emissions. When you look at the last report from the last report that talks about those things, that's climate change emission, climate Africa's carbon emission. We have 1.45 billion. That's the whole African continent, 54 countries in Africa. China alone had 11.47 billion tons, 11.47 billion tons of carbon emissions. The US 5 billion, Russia, Japan, and co followed, and all of them were in the billions. And when you also look at the impact, the suffering that when things, when the drought, the flood, and all those things come in, those countries suffer less. Africa suffers more. We Africa look up to those countries and ask for funding so that they can be able to improve or fight against climate change. The funding is not coming. Are we going to continue? Is Africa going to continue asking for funding, or is there a way out for Africa? What can Africa do? Looking at the impact we are suffering as people, the limits we are having when it comes to resources in terms of funding, what can Africa do? What are the key opportunities Africa can access from within Africa, not outside? What can we say, oh, as a continent, we want to do this? What can we do as a continent to push our fight against climate change without the foreign support or external support?
Dubile.
Yeah.
Flats don't wait for Europeans. African flats don't wait for Europeans. African droughts don't wait for Europeans. African, heat do not wait for Europeans. So why should African leaders wait for Europeans? I think that
Why should
this
they?
thing about dependency is killing us. You see, we're Africans, and I want to speak like I think I had the right platform to speak like an African. They say the day your father dies, that is when you become a man. Why? Because you know that all the responsibility, you don't have anybody to look up to. So you are forced to think outside the box. If I have the opportunity, well, for the for the sake of justice, as you demonstrated, Africans, emit less. They have, or we have not played any way to the current problems that we have in the world regarding climate change, because it's from American and European emissions, industrialization, that has taken us to where we are. Even the Chinese is not part.
Yeah,
China's emissions are yet to take effect in the
yeah,
atmosphere.
definitely.
So it's European, what we're experiencing now is European and American industrialization. So they cannot run away from their responsibility. You described how China is contributing to carbon, but it is important to also note that China is the world's leading producer and supplier of green technology. Indeed, a whopping 70% of green technology is produced and exported from China.
Yeah, that's very true, especially
And
solar.
if you look at the yes, if you look at the remarkable successes China has had in a short space of time in terms of climate change, reducing emissions, it's you know, we have to give China a thumbs up for what they're doing. They have, in terms of transport, transport emissions, they have reduced that significantly. Transportation is electric for all rail and also all public transport. Let me say this, put it that way. So China has is one of the best examples that we can pick in terms of uh, fighting climate change. At the moment, the only problem that they have is the production of electricity. They still use, coal, and there's evidence that they're still planning to even build more coal plants to produce enough energy to fuel their industrialization. Coming to Africa, I think that the analogy that I gave, Africans must be told the truth, the painful truth, that you cannot continue to look to somebody for assistance. You have your hands, you have your brains. There's a lot that Africa can do. You talked about solar, you talked about wind. Look at the Sahara Desert that is lying down. Now, right at this time of the year, if you go to the northern part of Ghana, if you go to Mali, if you go to Burkina Faso, you go to Mauritania, the Hamatan winds are so strong, said that when you put wind turbines there, you are going to generate amazing amounts of electricity. So we need to sit down and develop some of this infrastructure. What I think we can do is that, you see, climate change impacts doesn't know national borders. Just like what is happening in Burkina Faso, Bagre Dam, when they spill it, there's always problem downstream in Ghana. When droughts come, droughts doesn't know national boundaries. So it is time for Africans to look at this climate change issue from a regional perspective. We can all come together, pull our resources together, and build the necessary infrastructure that will help us to adapt to climate change. But left to one individual countries, I don't think we can do much. But when we're able to pull our resources together, I think that we can do amazing things. We have so much potential. They're telling us that Africa alone can produce enough electricity using wind and solar to power itself, the entire Africa, and also power the entire Europe. So we have the potential, and we can. And I think that this quest to seek assistance from Europeans and Americans, and even the Chinese, should be technology. We want technology transfer. Let us transfer the best technologies for adaptation so that we can do things by ourselves, and that will be more sustainable than giving money that to politicians, and it will enter into pockets and disappear, and the problems will still remain the same.
Wow, that's that's I don't know what to say. And just to touch on the Chinese part, the China is actually doing a lot. I think their goal to peak carbon emission by 2030, and to also produce at least 1,200 gigawatts of electricity, clean electricity by 2030. They are almost 5 years ahead of time. They want to meet that target by 2030, and they're almost 5 years ahead of time. And as he mentioned, they are the largest exporter of green energy or clean energy. And an example is Ethiopia, where China is very much involved in the power sector or energy sector. Almost 80% or 90% of Ethiopia's energy is now from clean energy. And that's thanks to China's role. Hydro, solar, wind. Kenya is also taking the same line. And I think Africa actually needs the technology, the Chinese technology. With China being the biggest exporter, that means they have the biggest technology. So if African countries can realign their needs and seek for more of technology transfer or training, it is actually something that can help. And I think slide that's something we are talking about yesterday. How China has been training African youth and Africa is not using them. For all you know, by now we have so many people who are trained in climate change, green energy, solar, hydro, and all those things from China, and they are in Africa right now. But maybe their expertise are less used and all those things. So yeah, African countries need to actually wake up and understand that they've lost their father. Now they have to take responsibility for their own and then move forward. Uh, yeah. So, Sly, you have anything to say on this? Any question for him?
No, I think you guys have said it all. It's important that Africa realigns its needs and take advantage of, especially its relations with China. I think these are some of the strategic ways that we can benefit from our relations with China. Our leaders should sit up and say that, look, these are the areas we need support from you. And, they implement the policies and the strategies according to that. I think that is what we need right now. If we are suffering the most from climate change and we are least resourced to fight it, and there are development partners available, why don't we leverage strategically to control it? So I think, yeah, that is the way to go. And I hope our leaders will live up to expectation.
All right. So just another quick one to Basa. Uh you we cannot take it that Africa can fight climate action and climate change alone. Definitely Africa cannot do it alone. Even if you have all the technology that you are working on your side to protect, but the emissions are also coming in, and definitely you can't stop that. So we need a form of accountability from everyone involved, a responsibility from everyone involved. And the West and China, for instance, may not be able to come and formulate policies in Africa. Africa can do that themselves. But Africa also needs support in the form of technology and funding. And let me talk specifically about the funding now. Uh, a number of years ago, 14 years ago, some developed countries pledged to make available $100 billion US dollars every year for less developed countries, which Africa is, let's say, majority of them will be from Africa, to help in climate action. And since then, there has never been a year that they've been able to make the 100 billion. The highest been 8 and 9 billion. That I think 2019 or 2022 thereabout. I'm not so sure of the figure yet. And United States, which is supposed to be, it is their industrialization and the European industrialization, as you said, that has brought us so far here. And they are supposed to be more responsible in that. But you seem they feel reluctant or they feel not compelled to do so. When you look at 2020, the contribution US was supposed to make towards the 100 billion was supposed to be 43%. That's 43% of the 100 billion they were supposed to provide. But US only sent 2 billion, $2 billion in that year. And you feel like, is there actually something that these people do, US, Europe, third parties, is there something they can do to actually push Africa apart from maybe Africans seeking for technology transfer, is there a way that we can actually enforce this? That when they actually say they are committed to this, they are committed to this, and they actually would do it. Is there a way that we can force it?
Yeah, thank you, Adam Biri. You're right to say that no one is an island. Africa cannot make it all alone, even though the leadership and policies and all that will have to come from them. They have to decide the kind of future they want before they can be supported. I think that the US in particular haven't really played good leadership when it comes to climate change. For one, they were the only country that withdrew from the Paris Agreement under Trump and only rejoined when Biden took over power. So I think that they haven't shown good leadership, good commitment towards the climate change fight. Having said that, also, I I I I think that it has been the same posture, the same pledges from COP 20, 28, 27 at Sam al-Sheikh in Egypt. The same pledge was made. The losses and damage fund, which they thought could facilitate and speed up adaptation in developing countries. It didn't work. It didn't work. So the United States in particular has paid more attention to conflicts. Now we have them spending billions in Ukraine, and now Israel-Palestine war has also started, and you can see the amount of money they're pumping. So it gives me the impression that when it's about war, fighting, killing people, you just spend huge sums of money and then into something that is wasteful, meant to destroy people. So I can't think I can't think far. I just think that the United States, in terms of critical issues like climate change, they have to set up, and then as a global superpower, they have to set up and try to in terms of justice, climate justice. We have demonstrated that we don't admit this is not our problem, but we suffer most. So they need to support us. They need to
All right.
support us. And the Chinese too, yes, China is of age. The Chinese economy is expected to overtake that of the United States. So maturity, economic and political maturity also comes with responsibility. And you're mentioning what they're doing in Ethiopia. That's fine. So it's a very classic example of partnership. From Ethiopia, we can, start rolling out some of these technologies in other countries, and then things will surely get better. Yeah.
All right. All right. So I we actually would love to have this conversation as long as we can, but we all are working with time and we can't continue for that long. But I would just want to have one final question, and then maybe also Sylvester if he has another question too. So COP 28 just ended, and this year Africa also had a first Africa climate summit, which they are proposing to be a annual kind of event where African leaders can meet to talk about climate change and all those. Uh, and COP 20, let's say COP is the biggest avenue for world leaders to meet and talk about climate change. So, but I feel their COP is just becoming a garden of world leaders, but less accent. Do you also have the same feeling, or you think COP can actually influence the climate change action, and then that Africa's climate summit, if it is implemented, it will be a game changer for Africa when it comes to climate change fight.
Thank you. Um, First, I'll support your idea of the African Climate Summit because we need to look at what is working and what is not working and what needs to be done more in terms of our fight against climate change. So the COP doesn't really provide us that space to be able to brainstorm and get things done in a more coordinated manner. Even before COP, we need to sit and decide exactly what we should, table at the international level for assistance. So, yeah, coming to the COP itself, this year, I think this COP 28 has the highest number of attendees. I think so, about 100,000 participants. And I think uh, about 700 of that were there physically, and then 300 were through virtual. Yeah, 30,000. Yeah, no, 300. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's becoming a mere talk shop because what's the essence of making agreements without any commitment to get them done? And I talk about the losses and damage fund. You in your submission, you demonstrated how the developed world that pledged that 100 billion failed to deliver. And you see, at that level, at the COP level, we have the African group negotiators, the AGN, that negotiates on behalf of Africa. And their leadership is getting disappointed and they're demoralized that every time they try to reach something with them, they will agree. Europe, the EU will agree, US will agree, but the commitment to deliver is not there. So what all this tells us is that African problems demands African solutions. And I think that was the purpose for the creation of the AU, to retool it, to be able to, you know, perform, to deliver development, socio-economic development for Africa. So we need, it's a wake-up call for all of us that if you don't solve your own problem and you are waiting for Americans and Europeans to come and address your problem for you, you'll wait forever. One of the things is even that of late, the American economy itself is not performing very well. And Europe too the same because their economies are aging. So they need to revitalize them. And that needs injection into the economies, into their economies. So if Africans we fail to look at our problems and we're waiting for Europeans to come and Americans to come, we may not realize anything significant. So that's my take. We need to wake up and try to take our own destiny into our hands.
Right. We need to wake up and take our own destiny in our hands. And if we want to wait for them, it is a forever wait we are waiting. All right.
Sure.
Sylvester, you have
Hmm.
anything?
Yeah, I must say that I've learned a lot, honestly, from just this short conversation that we've had with Mr. Tipisa. I think it's very educating, and inspiring and insightful as well. And I hope that this video will reach very far and wide so that people will get to hear. Like you said, we're not going to stop here. We're going to have these conversations happening once in a while. Just to add up on this climate change discussion, that you see, African governments shouldn't treat the climate change problem as an independent problem. It's a problem that permeates into a lot of issues. So, for instance, climate change is just worsening poverty, right? It's worsening, let's say, catastrophes, natural disasters, right? Like we have in Mepe in the Volta region, we had I think the flooding issue. It's just worsening our current problems. It's not creating new issues, you know. So they should look at it from that angle, and that becomes easier. We don't want a situation where they begin to raise new budgets for climate change. They should just do what they're supposed to do, and I believe that we will be able to fight against climate change. You know, for instance, if we are saying that drought is causing farms in the northern region not to produce as much as they used to produce, then we will need some irrigation mechanisms in place. You
Absolutely.
said one village, one dam. You know, how much have we done that? So we just have to look at the current problems that we have and improve on the solutions we have for them, but not to see the climate change issue as a totally different problem that has been created. You know, these are just exacerbating our already existing problems. So I hope that African governments will look at it from this angle and tackle it head on, you know, instead of trying to quote and unquote dupe us, you know, with some budgets here and there. When the monies come in, they should just use it as, you know, a way of solving already existing problems. So that is what I want to add to it. Just see it as a problem that is kind of worsening our original problems, and not. So, for instance, if rains take away schools under trees, you know, let's say it's just shelter, and because of flooding, it takes away, and students are not able to go to school again. You don't blame it on just the rains. It's because you don't have proper buildings there, and when you were building, you didn't also check very well, right? So we should just improve on our solutions, and I hope we'll be fine. Yeah. But otherwise, I think this has been a great conversation, and I hope we'll have Mr. Atibisa again to talk more about this climate change issue, and especially what China can do to help Africans mitigate, you know, the climate change problems. Yeah, but I think it's a great conversation.
That's really nice. All right, so I would take Raymond's Atibasa final thoughts. Your final thoughts on this, and then we would close for today. And as he said, we hope to have you another time. So, what are your final thoughts?
Thank you so much. My what I can conclude with is that climate change demands changes in every aspect of our lives, including uh, Minister talks about infrastructure. We need to change the way we build our houses. We need to climate proof everything that we do. And the business as usual kind of approach to things will prove very, very deadly. Even the way we manage food, food security is one of the issues that climate change um, that's affected by climate change. In Africa, we waste a lot of food. So farmers must decide when to harvest, because if you sow something like granules and you're waiting for the rain to come for you to harvest, and you don't harvest on time, you are likely to have everything to remain on the ground. Africans will waste a lot of food. Even food on our table, we are those that will harvest at harvest time. You find people and they'll eat small and go and throw the entire food away. One of the things I've learned in China here is that they don't waste their food. So we need to change everything. Now, the times of scarcity is here. So it's not like business as usual. Like learn to manage the things that God has given you, regardless of how much resources you have. If you can't manage them, you will always be poor. So the times of scarcity is here, and I think that we have to learn to manage our resources very well. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much to Itibasa. If you have resources and you can't manage them, definitely you would remain poor, and that's why Africa is poor because the lands are there for us to produce the food, but our people are hungry. The wind, the sun, the water is there for us to produce electricity, but half of us do not have access to electricity, and those that have, maybe they have to share that with darkness. So, African problem needs African solutions definitely, and maybe African can take a look at what China is doing, right? China wasn't so rich like that in some few years ago, but as of now, China is a world leader. So, what can Africans learn from it, and all that? We, as I said earlier on, this is just one of our episodes, and we wouldn't be ending here. So, more of these talks and similar, maybe other different interesting talks would come in. If you have not been a follower of Africans on China, and you are watching this video for the first time, maybe you should follow us because there's more to learn from us, and there's more we can also learn from your comments and your feedback and all those things. And you can read some of our articles on africansonchina.com. We have a lot of insightful topics, business opportunities, and all those things that you can take advantage of. And as a community, we are looking at building a climate or an environment where Africa can also become a world leader. African voice be amplified, and we are looking at the Chinese example.
Yeah, that's great, and I'm
I
really very
think,
happy
I
to be
think,
part of
I
this
think he
process.
has. I
It's
think he's
off.
frozen. I think
Yeah. So
Clifford is
that's why I
frozen.
like coming in. So I
Yes,
would
yes.
like to learn from you. I've learned a lot today, and I like to continue to learn from you and to also contribute to your project if
Right,
the opportunity is there.
right.
I like learning, and I'm also a Pan Africanist. I was sharing Kwame Nkrumah's books with some Africans. Some, Africa, we don't like reading, but we can
Yes,
only get good scholarship if we can read the works of others. And I think
right.
that Nkrumah's works is laid a firm foundation for Pan Africanism, and you and I were expected to build on that.
Yeah,
So I think I'm at the right place. So I think by today's participation, I can say that I'm a member, and anytime you
right.
can call on me. And I also
Yes.
subscribe to your uh, channel, and then I can follow your events.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. And we are actually looking forward to more collaborative um, opportunities with you on a lot of things, and especially now that you are based in Beijing with on your PhD program and all of that, we can engage more on some of these topic areas, especially on climate change, because looks and it's a novel area. Not many people are engaged in, but it's one of the most critical areas or issues
Sure,
that we are facing right now, and looks like nobody is going there. So
sure.
we will definitely explore more options of having this, even opening it up more to some other climate change enthusiasts and experts to join us to to amplify the African voice on climate change. I think even though we are the most affected, we are the most quietest, right? Um,
Yeah.
it's just like the Africa-China relations. It's been driven. The conversation has been driven by the Western experts, you know,
Yeah.
giving commentary on Africa-China relations. But where are the African experts? Where are the African voices? And that is one of the reasons why we decided to set up Africans on China, to amplify, and elevate the African voice on the Africa-China relations, right? And so here we are with climate change. There's an opportunity to also amplify the African voice on climate change, because at the end of the day, we are the most affected. So why shouldn't we be the most voiceless, right? We should talk more. We should let people hear about our thoughts on
We,
this issue. And I think
we,
it's
we
important
need
that,
to make noise, like
yeah,
we need to make
we need to
noise.
make
We need,
noise. Yes, yeah. Yeah, this
yes,
is the right noise, the positive
All
yes,
noise
right.
yes,
about issues that are
So,
affecting us. So we are really looking
yes.
forward to more engagement with you, Mr.
Thank you,
Tanga. And yeah, I'm sure there
all
are
right.
exciting things ahead of us. Clifford,
thank you,
close
All
us.
right. So, thank you very much, all of you, for coming, and we'd love to see you all again next time. And I think we can still talk more about climate change. This is not the end. There's so much that we're supposed to talk about, but we are limited by time. So, we'd hope to have you again, Mr. Tanga, to discuss more on climate change. And we're also open. If you have articles that you think you want us to publish on our site, we are ready for that. And we
great.
are ready to give you the platform to share your opinions and all this, on climate change and any other topic that you'd want on the African China space. So thank you once again, and it was a nice time having you.
Yeah,
Bye.
Thank you.
the Chinese will share, share.
Fish.
Bye bye.
All
Okay,
right.
okay, Zajen, Zajen.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, it's snowing here, and for the past 1 week, snow everywhere.